Hi, my name is Joseph Jackson. I'm here today to present to you Can a Robot Pass an Entrance Exam by Noroki Arai. So we'll start off by asking who is Noroki Arai. She's the inventor of the reading skills test, which we'll get to later, that was designed to be able to help students in elementary through high school take an exam to learn, their reading compensation skills. She founded the Research of Institute of Science for Education, and she's the head of the Todai Robot Challenge, which is basically the basis around this whole entire TED Talk. She's listed as an artificial intelligence expert and information society research division professor. She has a doctoral degree in science and much information online involving her studies and what she has done in the for the idea of artificial intelligence and advancing education. So before we get into the idea of the Todai Robot Challenge, Naruki Arai comes on and essentially just gives us a little bit of background and asks us some questions that we can ask ourselves before this TED Talk in order to better understand what we're going to address here. So I think Arai did a great job just off the start of just giving us an idea of what she was going to be talking about. Transitioning that from a question into an actual statements talking about how artificial intelligence is taking over. So we'll transition to the Todai Robot Challenge. The Todai Robot Challenge is essentially the basis for this entire TED Talk. So the goal is to develop the software that can pass entrance exams, and by software, they mean artificial intelligence or AI. So anytime you see AI addressed within this TED Talk, it refers to artificial intelligence. Basically, they created a robot that is capable of, or hopefully capable of, passing some of the hardest college entrance exams in Japan. Now, we all know that Japanese curriculum is very high and very stimulant and, very, very hard as a whole. So I think it was interesting just learning how they wanted to, design this robot, Todai, and he's similar to Watson or IBM, two of the automate or artificial intelligence robots that have been created in the past, and they are aiming to just seek the entire possibilities uh, of artificial intelligence. So I want to start off by asking, and obviously you guys can't answer, how many people think that robots could pass one of the hardest entries exams in Japan? The answer is we don't know this answer yet, which is the exact reason Oroki Narai is aiming to figure out the answer to that question. The reason for the creation of the Todai Robot Challenge is essentially to pass the entrance into the University of Japan, Tokyo, which is considered the hardest exam, or at least see, how high they can finish or what percentage column that this robot would be capable of, finishing, just to be able to compare that to the idea of humans passing tests and, the abilities that we can grant to artificial intelligence moving forward. So, to answer this question, I would say that we do not know the answer, but Arai is taking steps to help us learn. So, how does Todai Robot answer? Essentially, it uses factoid questions which utilize keywords much like humans. When humans, do not understand something, they go onto the internet, they go to Google, and they use keywords to type in something they would know. So, compared to this question on the right, Mozart's Last Symphony shares its name with this planet. The word "this," the Jeopardy style question, gives us the hint off the bat that this is a factoid question, as described by Narai. It takes the keywords from the question and places them into Google, just like a normal human would be, except it's much faster. And what it does is optimizes to find keywords and find answers. So, optimization, essentially described by Narai, is taking keywords, searching the internet for everything that it has to offer through Google, and putting together a basis of an answer based on just the keywords and the optimization that Todai Robot uses. So essentially, instead of having to memorize something, it's able to look things up, but it's not able to read. That is a huge point that I want everyone to remember that Oroki Narai has made in this TED Talk. The robots cannot read and they cannot understand, which is a very, very big difference between us and a robot, and the students in this test and the robots. So, Todai Robot essentially speaks like a human. and doesn't speak like a human. It essentially answers questions like a human and approaches questions similar to how a human may, but with a different approach, obviously, because our minds aren't connected to the internet. We actually have to physically search for them. Is how Narai describes it within this TED talk. But she did mention that a big, big key to remember in this is that robots do not understand and they cannot read. She mentioned to remember that throughout this entire talk. I think that the idea that it uses optimization keywords is very interesting. So, as you can see, based on the question on the previous slide, Symphony Number 41 by Mozart would be related to the question. So what it would do is would go on Google and optimize keywords, and it would take keywords, and the first link that would pop up would most likely be Wikipedia, we'd assume. So the robot does not read, the robot does not understand, but the robot is statistically correct, and the reason is because, as you can see in the picture, there's underlined words such as symphony, Mozart, and last that are all related to the question and keywords that we would type into Google. It takes this and does not read through the paragraph essentially, but makes an inference or a good inference guess based on the word structure and the composition of the optimized words within this page. So in this case, the Jupiter Symphony would be the correct answer for this. Todai Robot has a statistically good chance of putting together all this information on this page to be able to tell people the answer to this question is the Jupiter Symphony. But it is not always correct. But how did it write an essay if it cannot read? That's an even better question that Arai answered in a little bit more complicated terms. Essentially, Todai Robot does the same thing for writing as it would with searching for answers, except it combines sentences, essays, and other information that you can find on the internet into sentences of structures of its own. It's not always grammatically correct, but surprisingly enough, Todai Robot wrote a better essay than 20% of students that took this exam, which is very surprising because us as humans are able to think and grammatically say in our heads what we feel, and Todai Robot's using just optimization skills and, not understanding what it's saying, but putting its best foot forward, if you may, and saying, this is the sentence structure I'm going to put together for this answer based on what the question is asking me and my abilities. And I think that's really interesting. The errors, however, that Todai Robot presents are something that's very understandable. Todai Robot does not understand grammar. It responds much differently in situations than humans would with grammar situations. As you can see in this picture to the right, the clear answer to this, if you would read the question, would be answer D, your shoelace isn't tied. To any human, we are able to understand the conversational skills and understand what the person is trying to convey to us. In this case, Todai Robot picked B, which essentially would not make sense in this case. This is where Todai Robot's faults come into play, according to Arai. Noriko Arai describes Todai Robot as not understanding, but simply disguising that it does. So it wants to understand, it wants to be right, but it doesn't understand because it has no sense of emotion, it can't read, and it doesn't understand situational approaches to things. So a big section that it lacked in was the grammar section on this test, in which it scored much, much lower according to Rai. The results overall, however, for this entrance exam, compared to 60% of entrance exams in Japan, Todai Robot scored in the top 60%. It scored in the top 20% of students on the University of Tokyo exam, which is very surprising because that is the one I mentioned earlier that is the hardest in Japan. How can this be? And I think it all goes back to the idea that everything's automated and the idea that it can't understand but can put together, its best inference shows us that Todai Robot is capable of this. This shows us that, basically students are doing things wrong because a computer is more capable of doing things that humans should easily be able to do better than computers, but now we're adapting to that. How can we coexist with AI? What can humans do better? AI is obviously going to take over a lot of jobs, a lot of situations, but what can we as humans do better than AI and excel at those positions as? How many people can read as well as they think they can? Arai brought this up a lot of times because I had mentioned earlier the test that she had developed for students in Japan that had taken this after Todai Robot did this. And I think that she brings a good question to light that people can't read questions as well as, or in general, as they think they can based on this test that she had given out. And that's a big reason why students aren't scoring as high as they should be on these tests compared to a robot that can't understand or think and is basically brand new to this idea. I think that she brings a good question to light with that because it's honestly perfect, and it brings the idea that people don't know as much as they think they do or they should, and we can do better as humans to be able to excel at things that we should already be doing way better than we are. Um, she developed this test, and it essentially gave the students in Japan from elementary to high school a good compensation. Not compensation, excuse me. It gave them a good test to be able to, measure their reading skills, and that's where she developed this idea that people might not be able to read as well as they think they can. How long will this take for artificial intelligence to overtake everyday human jobs? Was my first question. And I think this is a big, big question because Arai describes artificial intelligence as definitely going to take over a lot of responsibilities that humans have every day in their jobs. But we as humans need to be able to avoid the negatives of AI, artificial intelligence. So how can we do that? How can we avoid, all the things that they're going to take over, and we can still be able to keep our jobs and responsibilities as humans, of the world, and not let them keep advancing as robots, but us as people advancing. And what will be the next step if artificial intelligence becomes advanced? Will they be able to understand? Will they be able to read? Which is, the clear flaw as of right now, according to Arai in this TED Talk. And I think that the answer will be yes, they will be able to understand. But I think it's going to be an idea of humans doing what they do better than and more advanced as we are in the process as we are, and being able to advance quicker than robots, because it's going to take some time and development for them to be able to understand this and some of the things that we're trying to get them to comprehend. But in the end, I think that humans can definitely stay where they're at and be dominant and, take control of situations while using artificial intelligence to make things better and quicker and more convenient for us as people. These questions all bring to light the idea that Todai Robot, made a huge step for Noroki Arai, and she is only going to take this further from here, and there's been much development from here on Todai Robot.